Hello, good evening. Anita Anand speaks to the world's greatest experts on the crisis in Iran and Venezuela. Join Kim Ghattas, Jon Lee Anderson, Scott Anderson, and Lyse Doucet as we discuss the world's two biggest crises with leading correspondents. I now invite our esteemed speakers to begin the session. Kim Ghattas is a Middle East expert, author, and Emmy-award-winning journalist. She is a contributor for The Atlantic magazine and The Financial Times. She previously reported for the BBC from the Middle East and Washington, D.C. She is the author of Black Wave, a New York Times 100 Notable Book of 2020 on the Saudi-Iran rivalry, and The Secretary, a journey with Hillary Clinton from Beirut to the heart of American power, a New York Times bestseller. Jon Lee Anderson is an American journalist. As the New Yorker staff writer since 1998, he has reported from numerous countries and war zones. His books include Che Guevara, A Revolutionary Life, The Fall of Baghdad, and most recently, To Lose a War, The Fall and Rise of the Taliban. Scott Anderson is the author of 2 novels and 6 nonfiction books, including Lawrence in Arabia, an international bestseller. His current work, King of Kings, was a New York Times bestseller and winner of the Kirkus Prize. A contributing writer of the New York Times Magazine's Anderson's 2016 landmark report on the Middle East, Fractured Lands, remains the longest sole author article in American magazine history. Lyse Doucet from Canada is the BBC's chief international correspondent. For the past 4 decades, she has reported on major news stories around the world and was based as a correspondent in Jerusalem, Amman, Islamabad, Kabul, and Abidjan. The Finest Hotel in Kabul is her first book. They are in conversation with Anita Anand, is an award-winning radio and television journalist who presents Any Answers, PM, and The Reflexers on BBC Radio 4, and she is the author of Sophia, Princess, Suffragette, Revolutionary, Conure, and The Patient Assassin, which won the Penn Hassel Tiltman Prize. Anita has served as a trustee of the Women's Prize for Fiction and Nonfiction, a patron of the Museum of Richmond, and an advisory board member of the Oxford Centre for Global History. In 2024, she received an honorary doctorate from the University of London. She also co-presents the acclaimed Empire podcast with William Dalrymple. I now invite our esteemed speakers to begin the session. Our speakers, Jon Lee Anderson and Lyse Doucet, will be joining us virtually this session.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, one of the wonderful things about being at a festival like JLF is that it is a melting pot of some of the greatest minds in the world today. One of the saddest things about JLF is that sometimes events can move at such a pace that the people you had hoped to see and shake hands with in person are called away by duty. And that is what is happening today, because we expected to have my lovely friend Lyse Doucet here in person, but events in Iran have meant that A, she's trying to get in there, and B, she is covering rolling news for the BBC in London. And likewise, Jon Lee Anderson, who is in South America, who we also hoped to be here pressing the flesh. He is poised like a coiled spring. I'm sure that's a mix of unfortunate metaphors, but he's just there raring to get into Venezuela. So why are we doing this session, and why did it suddenly happen? Because the world feels really scary right now. And events are moving at such pace. There are anxious nights in Tehran in anticipation of bombing from above, days filled with bloodshed as protesters are mowed down by security forces. And despite the telecommunications blackout, we still see images of thousands of dead in the streets. And for now, at least, Venezuela, that seemed like the place that would blow, well, that's retreated somewhat from center stage. Donald Trump claimed victory after snatching Nicolas Maduro. Cuba, Colombia, Mexico. They are now all on a high state of alert because they believe they could be next. So the reason we've amassed these fabulous people is because we're asking the questions that you're probably asking in the dead of night when you wake up in a cold sweat. What is going to happen now? So actually what we should do is, because Jon and Lyse have forgone this wonderful festival to cover the latest, is find out what the absolute latest is. So if we can go to Lyse Doucet first of all, what are you hearing from Iran?
Yes, let me begin by saying that, and I know Jon will say the same, that we are devastated not to be at Jaipur with all of you in the audience, with our dear friends on the stage. And since I'm the BBC, I have to give you some news that I just found out, breaking news, that Scott and Jon Lee are brothers.
Yes.
Who knew?
Yes, we should have mentioned that.
Yes.
Yes. They're Nepo babies of sorts, but they are brothers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and I loved your expression, Anita, the melting pot, because our minds are truly melting at the way the world has turned so suddenly right across the world in many capitals, and including in Iran and Venezuela. I will begin by saying, and Scott and Kim will, of course, and will, in fact, Jon Lee as well, will have something to add. In short, the first phase, if I can call it that, of this latest wave of unrest in Iran, which was unprecedented, to use the word of our time, in so many ways, seems to have ended. The near total internet blackout, being described as the biggest telecommunications blackout anywhere in history, is slowly lifted. Some websites are now available. Telephone calls are working in both directions. Slowly, Iran is coming out of the darkness. And what do we know? We do know, and we've known this for a few days, is that also the unprecedented use of force by the Islamic Republic of Iran. It has been used before, a combination of a blackout plus force on the streets, put down protests time and again. This time, because the protests accelerated at a pace not seen before, they also too accelerated the crackdown in a way, and it emptied the streets across the country, which had filled with this roar calling for change, some calling for economic change, some calling for political, some calling for a whole systemic change. And what is happening in Iran now? They are counting the dead, a terrible phrase to use. They're trying to find the dead, people anxious to find where their loved ones with you, sometimes having to negotiate with the authorities. Sometimes we understand having to pay money to get to retrieve the body of their loved ones for burial. And all the time hanging over the embers that are burning still in this particular moment in Iran. What is also unique about this time, and Scott will reach back in history as well, is that Iran is facing this unprecedented internal upheaval at the same time that it faces an external threat. And the big question in many capitals is, what will President Trump do next? And of course, President Trump likes to boast that only he knows what will come next. So let me say that it seems to be on pause, a very anxious pause.
Jon Lee Anderson, Venezuela, I mean, whether it's on pause or not, the world's gaze has shifted so completely to Iran. I mean, just fill us in on what you're hearing.
Well, I would also say Liz's very succinct analysis of the situation in Iran, which, by the way, Iran was being put on call just days before the attack on Venezuela, which resulted in the abduction of its president, Nicolas Maduro. Donald Trump, in the immediate aftermath of that capture, warned Venezuela that a much bigger attack could occur, military attack, if the remnant regime, which he has left in place in this rather surreal, almost a kind of improv coup, if you will, could happen again. So that country is also on call, on warning that it could be bombed again. That is to say, its leaders, its military structure, and so on. So he has done, Trump and his coterie have adopted a most unusual solution, which I think they're congratulating themselves about, which is that they haven't put boots on the ground, therefore denying Maduro's colleagues Americans to shoot at. there can't be a war against the foreign invader because the foreign invader isn't there. It's now the empire which fires drones or calls in airstrikes from a distance, as it has done in Iran. And this seems to be the new formula. When President Trump, to call him something, had his first press conference, he never mentioned democracy. In the immediate aftermath of Maduro's abduction, he mentioned oil. And he explained that Iran, these were orders given by him to Maduro's colleagues, whom he has left in place, that they will henceforth send the United States $50 billion worth of oil, and they will be buying their food and medicines from the United States henceforth. There's a kind of there's a very pointed ideological construct logic behind all of this, which is the Monroe Doctrine, the 1829 doctrine by the third American president, whereby the Western Hemisphere had to be foreigner-free, that is to say, free of foreign interference. In recent months, Trump has announced that there's a Trump corollary to this doctrine, whereby that old coda, that old directive is being revived. It all fits within what we've seen in the past year. The expulsion of people from other countries, it's America first. It's also white Americans first. It explains why he wants Greenland. He wants American hegemony from the Arctic, essentially, to the Antarctic. And Venezuela is the first touchstone. It's the debut. It's the curtain raiser of this new America First policy. So that's right. He has warned various other countries that they could be next. And as for Venezuela, it's a very strange construct in which he has anointed the vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, who ideologically was in sympathy with Nicolas Maduro, but he's calling her a very nice lady, and the woman who won the Nobel Peace Prize and believed herself to be the Eva Perón who would return, Maria Corina Machado, he's pushed her off to stage right. And that's the situation we have. Here in the region, everybody expects trouble to come because the security forces and the intelligence services are in the hands of a very anti-American, anti-imperialist figure who could cause trouble for her, however much she decides to obey Donald Trump's dictates.
Right.
It's very much, as Liz was saying about Iran, Venezuela on the pause button.
So what I'm going to attempt to do, and forgive me if we're doing this on the fly, so it may not be as well polished and thought out, but I think it's worth trying, is to not just look at the parallels between Venezuela and Iran, but also the lessons that history can teach us. Because all of us, or all of you in particular, you have one foot in the world of journalism and another looking back into history also. So I guess I'll start with you, Scott, because we played this game before. Doesn't this feel a bit like the 1970s?
It does, and my book is on the Iranian Revolution of 78 and 79, the overthrow of the Shah, and what's fascinating is that what is bringing people out to the streets of Tehran and other Iranian cities is very much the same issues as they came out against the Shah. Economic collapse, lack of jobs, corruption among the ruling elite. And I mean, one big difference being, of course, that in 1978-79, there was this tremendous religious component to it. The other huge difference is that the Iranian Revolution played out over 14 months, and there was these kind of odd ebbs and flows to it, so that it was very difficult until very late in the game to really know how serious trouble the Shah was in. I feel that what we've seen now has just been telescoped down into a few days, at most 2 weeks. And one kind of brutal illustration of that is that if the numbers I'm hearing out of Iran of dead I'm hearing 12,000 minimum. If those numbers are accurate, we're already 4 times more people killed in this revolt than were killed in the Iranian Revolution. So there have been these periodic upheavals in Iran about the clerical rule. They've always been put down violently. The difference this time, I think, is that you can measure how serious the regime feels it's in trouble by the sheer body count that you're seeing. The Shah, maybe to his credit as a human being, if not being an autocrat, he was faced with the choice at a crucial moment of whether he was going to machine gun his people into submission to maintain his throne. And he said several times, if saving my throne is going to come at the cost of the Iranian youth, I'm not going to do it. And he didn't do it. So I fear what the ultimate lesson that this regime took away from overthrowing the Shah is you start shooting and you just never stop until they finally give up.
And Jon Lee Anderson talked about, the Monroe Doctrine, this way of behaving, this code of conduct, if you like, this consensus. It's being called right now, we're living through the Donroe, as Donald Trump, the Donroe Doctrine. You, John, talked about the kind of unease in other South American countries. And, what are you hearing, Kim Ghattas, about, the eyes watching Iran in the Middle East? It's going to have a profound effect on those countries.
It is absolutely going to have a profound effect on the rest of the region, just the way that the 1979 revolution had a profound effect on the region, and we're still living with the ripple effect, right? So 1979 is the birth moment of the rivalry with Saudi Arabia. It's the birth of Iran's efforts to export the revolution, which gives us Hezbollah. In Lebanon, the Iranian Revolution collides with the Israeli invasion of Lebanon in 1982, which, as I said, gives us the birth of Hezbollah, but also a 4-decade-long project where Iran builds its architecture in the region of proxy militias. And because of what it goes through during the 80s in the war with Iraq, where it feels like everybody's ganging up against Iran, they decide never to allow themselves into such a situation again. And they develop this architecture of forward defense bases in Syria, in Iraq, in Lebanon, and in Yemen. And today it feels as though, I'm going on a slight tangent, but I'll come back to your point, that Israel has flipped the script on Iran. And it is now ringing Iran with chaos and a bombing campaign from Gaza to Lebanon to Syria to Yemen as well. So this is a region that is very much in flux. And for me, it is the end of the road for the Islamic Revolution and the Islamic Republic. But it's a dead end, but we don't know how long that road is. So when I published Black Wave in 2020, I already wrote about the fact that the Islamic Revolution was exhausting itself. But it requires a lot to uproot and to unseat a regime which, as Scott said, is willing to shoot its people, as much as necessary, as many as necessary, to remain in power. What is different this time from past unrest, whether in 2022 with Masa Amini movement or 2009, the Green movement, is the unknown factor, the Trump factor, and the Israel factor. This is the first time that you have unrest in Iran at the same time as you have outside leaders, the US and Israel, who are willing to push and be actively involved in bringing down the regime. Are they going to do it or not? I suspect they will, but not just yet. I think it happened a little bit too quickly. They were not ready. Trump has FOMO, fear of missing out, when it could be a success. Right? But he doesn't want to do something and it might fail. You could argue about the legality of the kidnapping of Maduro, but it was technically a masterstroke.
Right.
And he would like to have something similar in Iran. So this is going to require some more preparation, lining up of military assets, and seeing whether inside Iran the protesters can come back onto the streets, because as Scott writes so brilliantly in his book, the protests during the Iranian Revolution were on a cycle of 40 days. You know, you kill some protesters, 40 days later you have the Arba'in, the 40th commemoration, people come back onto the streets, more people get killed, and that's how you build the momentum. And I'll just finish with one last quick point, Anita. One of the reasons why Trump kind of stepped back from the brink or the threat, or the promise, rather, right? He said to the Iranians, you know, help is on the way, and it wasn't. And Iranians are not going to forget that. But the reason why he stepped back is because the Saudis and the Turks cautioned him against provoking the fall of the regime when no one is ready yet to deal with the day after.
Well, I mean, let's analyse that a bit more, because I mean, you all seem to agree this is Trump's car and we're just all passengers in it. So let's talk about why, you know, at least what you're hearing from Iran, and whether there is that unforgiving attitude coming from Iran that, hey, hang on a minute, either you promised to send help and you didn't, or the other voice that I'm hearing, which is, for God's sake, stop promising to send help, because we have like a nascent, rebellion here, and if we look like we're being funded by the Americans or in league with the Americans, you're going to kill us in our cradle.
Everyone on this panel, and I think everyone in the audience knows that the Iranians are a very nationalistic people, very proud of their ancient Persian civilization. I arrived in Iran in June, just as the ceasefire was declared, the end of the 12-day war between Iran and Israel, which drew in the United States. And people were angry that there had been a foreign intervention. And in fact, much to the satisfaction of the authorities, there was a rallying around the flag moment. You even had Narges Mohammadi, the Nobel laureate, who was in prison, in Evin prison, when the Israelis bombed the entrance to the prison. We went to visit it. And she said, what are you doing? You're making even more. You're causing people inside to suffer even more. But fast forward to where we are now, and I think you hear, insofar as we can hear, let's keep reminding ourselves there is this blackout that has been enforced and is just now lifting. But what we hear is that more Iranians are saying, well, if that's what it takes, maybe a little nudge would help. And yet, even though you have on the one side Reza Pahlavi, the son of the ousted Shah, appealing directly to President Trump, saying you've got to help us, you have to take action, including military action. On the other side, you have Narges Mohammadi and a group of 17 dissidents and well-known cultural figures from Iran saying, no, change must come, but it must be peaceful and it must come from within. Jafar Panahi, the celebrated Iranian director, is also saying, no, an external intervention will not help. And everyone knows, we've seen it time and again. There are many, many readers and followers of history on this panel and in the audience, is that you cannot bring change only from above and from outside. And history tells us when fervor on the street meets force from above, we don't know how it's going to change. Is it going to change from above? Is it that for many years now, even before this current wave of unrest, there was much speculation that after this supreme leader passed away, one day he will pass away, that the next supreme leader will not be so supreme, that it is the most powerful actors of all the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps who dominate Iran in every way, economically, militarily, even politically. They will be the ones in charge. Will they do something so they take out the theocratic element? But I think for the United States, circling back to where we were, President Trump keeps saying, I like to win. And he said last week, I want to win the end game in Iran. What is President Trump's end game? Is it like in Venezuela, where he would, and it would be much more difficult, to take out the leader at the top of the Islamic Republic and then deal with the clerics and the IRGC to see whether he can find someone who gives him the oil, changes the nuclear doctrine, no enrichment of uranium? We just don't know. And that is where Iran finds itself now.
Okay.
A profound yearning for change, and I think even within the ruling clerics and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, but not knowing where to find that change and what kind of change that they want in a country that 92 million people.
Jon Lee Anderson, I mean, you were nodding along to much of that, but I mean, with all of your wealth of experience and your breadth of travel, what is his end game in Venezuela, and how is it going to play out in Venezuela?
Look, I think it would behoove us all, and anybody who's interested in pondering what the hell Trump is about, to go back to his inaugural speech a year ago in January. He spoke about territorial expansion. He spoke about taking back the Panama Canal, which is ours. He spoke about Greenland several times. He unveiled what we now are seeing happen before us, at least in the Western Hemisphere, which is this idea of reasserting America's hegemony over the entire Western Hemisphere, perhaps in emulation of perhaps in emulation of Putin, who is attempting to reassert control over the former dominions of the Soviet Union in Europe. It has to be said that Trump has done everything to weaken Western Europe. So in that sense, he seems to have ceded ground to Putin, but wants to compete with him from the Arctic down, particularly in the Arctic Passage as the ice is melting, to be able to have American ships up there. And ultimately competing also with Xi. He wants to see the Chinese removed from the Western Hemisphere, where they have made significant inroads over the past 20 years, mostly in terms of trade relationships, but on the brink of its own external military expansion, which we're seeing in the Pacific with the world's largest naval fleet, and of course, and the threats against Taiwan. I think the Trump doctrine is unveiling pretty much as we see it. He often says things jokingly first, but usually it's serious. And that, I think, over 10 years, we've learned now what Trump's style is. So it is that style. People at first don't take him seriously, and then it turns out that it's very serious. We're seeing that happen right now in Greenland. There is this thing about him wanting to win, therefore, Trump always chickens out, that other acronym, TACO. But right now we're seeing him follow through where he thinks he can. Venezuela was low-hanging fruit. Nicolas Maduro was a very unpopular leader. You've had an outflow of anywhere between a third and a half of its population because of mismanagement, corruption, and the implosion of oil prices. So much of the region is of mixed feelings about Maduro being taken out, and half hoping that, well, maybe this will work. While, however, they are askance at Trump and worried about it. The other bottom line with Trump is that it's stick and carrot, always stick and carrot. He's doing the same domestically in the United States with these ICE deportations, and he's made it very clear to, I think, Americans and the rest of the world that he is, in fact, a racist. He said so the other day. The only refugees being allowed in the country are white South African Afrikaners. Everybody else is being expelled. So however much going back to Venezuela, however much he liberates them from the, the tyranny of the Chavismo, as the phenomena of the Bolivarian revolution calls itself. I think there's also there is, much as Lise was talking about in reference to Iran, there is a bedrock of nationalism and frustrated nationalism that is, that it's extant in Latin America and has very much to do with past interventions by the United States. We'll have to see how this plays out, but it's worth noting that Venezuela and Colombia, where I am right now, which share a common heritage and borders, have the region's last armed insurgencies, and some of them have been going for over 60 years. One of them particularly straddles both sides of the border and come under the loose command of Venezuela's intelligence chief. Therefore, and they are very anti-imperialist. They had a Marxist origin, and they have said several times that they're willing to fight the United States if it intervenes further in Venezuela. So this is a messy chessboard to be playing around with, and let's see what happens next. I think going forward, what we will probably see with Cuba, which is a country that's on the ropes, it's an island, it doesn't have any economy to speak of at the moment, and what energy it was getting came from Venezuela. It is under a de facto naval blockade now by the United States because of the intervention in Venezuela. The idea there will be to squeeze them, to asphyxiate them, and then, much as I think we're seeing everywhere, a negotiation, hoping for a negotiation from within. Effectively, it's extortion or blackmail with a cudgel, and then seeing if someone will cry uncle first to then deal with them.
Right.
We will now see how this plays out.
I want to bring in our panel here in Jaipur as well. You weren't, Kim, present in the room, but Scott and I had an extraordinary moment when we were talking to an Iranian woman who was in touch with dissidents in Iran. And it seemed certainly as if within the last 3 days or so, there has been a sea shift that, look, we haven't yet seen the picture of Trump with his arm around Reza, the son of the former Shah, but he is living in America. Some people find that objectionable and like a direct link to American control. And yet, there is this consensus that there is no one else to lead against the mullahs. I mean, you're hearing this also.
That's right. I just want to go back to something that Lee said earlier. Not even a month ago, 3 weeks ago, I was talking to people in the Iranian opposition, and they were in a state of despondency, as they've been since the Israeli and American bombings in June. As Lee said, that sparked this huge rallying around the flag effect, and so opposition felt, if we go out now and protest, we're going to be painted as lackeys of the Zionists and the Americans. Then everything flipped. I was also, hearing nothing but derisive remarks about Crown Prince Reza, and now all of a sudden people are chanting Javid Shah in the streets of Tehran. I think one of the challenges we all face in trying to divine what comes next is Trump. I don't think he knows what he's going to do next. So you kind of go to, it's kind of the madman theory of rule, and there is a certain perverse power that comes with that nobody knows what he's going to do next because he himself doesn't. And I've always felt that people, journalists often are, kind of analyzing why Trump does one thing or another, kind of give him too much credit. And one thing that what we're hearing a lot about now is like, oh, he came to office as isolationist. America was not going to get involved in the world, and how is this now playing with the isolationist wing of his party that don't want any foreign intervention? My personal feeling is that segment of his constituency, they're not isolationists. They just want America to win finally. When was the last time America won a conflict? I think it's Grenada in 1983. So I think that this isolationist idea is skin deep. What will he do in Venezuela? What will he do in Iran? I think Venezuela is more complicated in a funny way than Iran. I think that he's probably, with Iran, there may be a deal cut with the Revolutionary Guard. I agree with Kim that I think the days of the Ayatollahs is coming to an end. They're not going to be arrested, but they're going to be sent to pasture. Maybe a deal is cut with the Revolutionary Guard, who are the true backbone of the Iranian regime. Or Trump just says, you know what, the killing stopped. I mean, he's already said that. Problem solved. Let's go on to Greenland. I think that I think it's really hard to tell what comes next.
Kim, again, if it is going to be no boots on the ground, I think everyone agrees there's no appetite for that. But if it is to be a figurehead sitting in Washington right now who goes back to Iran to be the final toppling of the Ayatollahs, the clerics, I'm already seeing a great deal of discomfort from Palestinian Twitter, from Yemeni Twitter, saying, you know what, they were the only ones who stood by us, funded us, give us guns. What are you doing defying them? We will stick with that because it helps us, and if that goes, we're done. I mean, are you hearing that kind of thing as well?
There are many different opinions in the Middle East about Iran's role. and how it has funded proxy militias across the region. You can call Iran the leader of the axis of resistance, or you can call it the leader of the axis of evil, as President Bush did in 2003, or you can call it, as many people in the Middle East call it, leader of the axis of misery. Because from the perspective of a lot of people in the Middle East, Iran's funding for these proxy militias in the region has not brought deliverance or a better life for anybody. Not for the Palestinians, not for the Syrians, not for the Iraqis, not for the Yemenis, and it has come at the cost of a better future for Iranians. So yes, there will be those who say, you can't bring down this regime. It is the only one that is providing weapons and money to Hamas or to the Houthis or to Hezbollah. But that also goes against the wishes of a lot of people in the region who are tired of being a proxy battleground for Iran. And who feel that Iran has delivered nothing but destruction and misery. And when it comes to the Palestinian cause, I'm, for one, strongly believe that most of the Iranian regime does not really care about Palestine. It cares about using the Palestinian cause to project its power in the region, beyond Iran, the borders of Iran, beyond the Shia community, and to take on the mantle of the self-righteous defender of the Palestinian cause and the anti-imperial, movement. But again, that has come at a great cost to the Lebanese, to the Syrians, the Iraqis, and also, you could argue, even the Palestinians. Hamas did not deliver, did not achieve what it thought it would achieve when it conducted the massacre of October 7th. So there are divided opinions. And I think what really matters at this point, and what people in the region really should focus on, is that it is up to the Iranians to decide who they want to be ruled by. And that it is not up to us in Lebanon to say, oh no, why don't you keep the Islamic Republic because it suits us in Lebanon. There are 90 million people who live in Iran, and they've made their voices very clear. They are done with this regime. And they chant on the streets of Iran, enough with Syria, enough with Gaza, think of us. And as a Lebanese who resents foreign interventions in my country, I am certainly not going to tell the Iranians, you know what, why don't you keep the Islamic Republic? Because, we enjoy, the funding that it gives to Hezbollah, which then attracts, Israeli retaliation against our country. These are very complex issues. There is no right answer, except, I think, listening to the Iranian people and what it is that they want.
Lisa, John, we've been here in JLF, and it's sort of a hermetically sealed wonderland, and I'm so sorry that you're both not here. You are both in the world still. I've kind of lost track of what the international community is saying. So, Lisa, first of all, if we come to you, what is Europe doing, saying, if anything, or are they completely sclerotic about what's going on?
Need I say that people the world over are tired of words, the words which get stronger but have no impact on the ground? I suppose there's that expression about not just doing something but being seen to do something. There has been a tsunami of statements from capitals the world over, criticizing the Iranian crackdown, criticizing them, saying that people have a right to protest without fear of reprisals. Now, human rights groups who have been from the beginning documenting as far as possible the numbers of deaths, how the deaths occurred, what are the abuses, and whether the abuses are continuing. And all of the numbers are very high. Even President Trump, who said, I'm going back to the White House to see, and I have two numbers. And at that point, it was between 2,000 or 12,000. It's definitely in the thousands. Even the authorities admit to that, and of course they blame it on they blame it on Israel and the U.S. and on the protesters themselves. So yes, there has been criticism, but sadly we do, and I say this as a Canadian, where Trump has said he wants Canada to be the 51st state. We live in a room where the fulcrum of the world is not just turning around the United States, but turning around, as we've been saying repeatedly, an unpredictable president. So it's waiting, every morning we wait and see what President Trump is going to post on Truth Social. Is it going to be about Greenland? Is it going to be about Venezuela? Is it going to be about Iran? Is it going to be about all of us? We just don't know. So yes, the words have been there. Sanctions are imposed. President Trump has a list of options, we understand, and he keeps looking at the options. And that is, so finally I will say there was a lot of criticism that the Western, particularly, us legacy media, that we weren't paying enough attention to Iran. But quite frankly, the expression being used is that President Trump floods the zone, doing, a blizzard of actions in the United States, a blizzard of action internationally that we're struggling to. One day it's Minneapolis, one day it's Greenland, the other day it's Venezuela. So we're trying to focus on it. And Iran now has broken through. And everyone again asking what next.
Jon Lee Anderson, I mean, that's sort of an international. I really want to know what's going on in America because, on leaving, I mean, it was sort of Marjorie Taylor Greene who was sort of popping up and being the most vocal about, hang on, mate, this is not what you said you were going to do. And, somebody else has pointed out that Marco Rubio, when he appears in the back of a news broadcast, looks as though he might be in a hostage video. I mean, just what are you hearing about those around President Trump? And whether they're just going to sort of, hold their tongues, or are there more voices joining in?
It's a very good, well, not yet. Those voices are not joining in just yet. And certainly not from, there's a few people, even within the Republican Party, which is, essentially held hostage to this now cult of Donald Trump, that have broken with him. You mentioned Marjorie Taylor Greene. There's a few others. They're on the kind of edges of the party and of this incredible power structure that he's built, which is chaotic, which is colliding within the United States through these rather horrific ICE interventions in mostly Democratic-leaning cities, where we've seen the killing of a white American woman in the past week. On videotape, and the Trump regime doubling down to describe her as a terrorist. This is, I think something has happened that combines this past, 2 weeks now, of the Venezuela intervention, this surge of killing and threats vis-a-vis Iran, and also this latest and most sustained intervention in Minneapolis in the United States, where it's definitely this ultra-right-wing ideology that has a paramilitary component, increasingly has a paramilitary component that is obvious and visible, that is colliding with the bedrock principles of fairness and humanity within the United States. And we may see something come out of this. It may be terrible, or maybe we will begin to see leaders, even Republicans, begin to oppose what's happening openly. Because what is happening is that Americans are now living in fear. This never happened before. ICE was given an $85 billion budget this year, unprecedentedly huge budget. He then basically held open a recruitment drive. Essentially, any American between some age and another age can join ICE, wear a mask, and be given also a $50,000 signature bonus. And we have seen these people, we don't know who they are, now intervening, as we've seen paramilitaries in other countries, essentially militias, irregulars, but with the backing of the White House, behaving in a way that goes far beyond what any American has expected to see for many, many years. The last time there was anything approaching this was during the Vietnam War, back in the 60s, early 70s, when the National Guard, which is, a known force, went into cities during rioting. There was nothing like that happening this time. But also ICE is a force that is masked, it's terrifying, and we're seeing a real response. This could be, and people are beginning to realize that this may go beyond the immigration issue, which has been such a strong feature of Donald Trump's presidency, and actually an effort to intervene militarily in America itself and to fundamentally change it. So I think a lot of people are very worried now. That's the bottom line. This is kinetic. This is dynamic, as it can be said. And going forward, I think watch this space. The United States is now on a knife edge that it has not been on in my lifetime.
I just want to add a quick thing to that. If you look at what could change the Trump administration going forward, really kind of the ray of hope is the midterm elections coming up next year. The Republicans, both in the House and the Senate, have just rolled over and let Trump do whatever he wants. But in these, there have been a series of special elections in the past 6 months. Democrats have won all of them. So I think at a certain point, the Republicans in the House and the Senate who are up for re-election are going to get scared. They're going to develop a spine, hopefully, some of them, and start standing up to Trump, if for no other reason than they see that it's to their political benefit to do so. Otherwise, I think we're in for a very long next 3 years.
Right.
Except what Jon Lee said.
Go on,
Jon Lee says, and Jon Lee reminded us that first President Trump jokes and then he does it seriously. He's joked twice that there will be no midterms. And Scott, you live in the US, so you know better than we do. I was stunned when I was in New York last September and people said to me, there's no midterms. They're going to stop the midterms. Maybe, I don't know what you think.
Well then, look, I'm going to open it up to questions. I mean, anything is possible. I mean, sometimes I think during these sessions I'm attending some kind of dystopian fiction workshop, but this is here and this is now. Let's get some questions. So there is a woman here at the front, and then I'm going to take, just here, wave if you know I'm pointing to you. There is a man in a pink shirt over there. Keep waving till you get a microphone. You'll be number 2, and we'll move along. If you keep your questions short, we'll get more in. Thank you very much. So the woman with the microphone, first of all, if you can stand up so we can all see where you are. Thank you.
It's a great session. My question is to Jon Lee. I understand the chaos Trump administration, the president himself is creating around in the United States and across. But very quickly, Venezuela, if the mission was oil, if they're that rich, why is Venezuela so poor? I think American yield for oil is way higher than Venezuela. They don't need the oil from Venezuela. It's probably just some trade bargain. I'm just playing the devil's advocate here.
Okay.
When it comes to Iran, Islamic regime, I think the situation in Iran is self-inflicted. And that's why I don't think so. It's a case caused by Trump, by President Trump. So, and back in Minneapolis,
okay,
ICE immigration, what happened is not fair and it's against human rights, but come on, she was provoking the ICE agent. We've seen the videos.
Okay, right. That's a lot, lady. Okay, that is a lot. I can see Jon almost coming out of this, Jon Lee coming out of the screen at that. Shall we take it bit by bit then, shall we? Jon Lee, do you want to handle the Venezuela point?
Sure. I mean, Venezuela has the largest proven oil reserves in the world. Period. Okay? It's not Honduras, which only has bananas. So there's an obvious reason why Trump is interested there. As we know, his family enriches itself wherever he institutes some kind of foreign relation, some policy, whether it's Saudi Arabia or the Emirates or anywhere. So I have no doubt that in the call to the oil majors to come and invest in Venezuela, one of the companies owned by his family will also be slipping in there to make a few $1 billion. I'm saying this not out of any kind of particular ideological, affirmation. These are facts. We've never seen a president so corrupt in the history of the United States. So there's a brazenness to him and his family that is unprecedented. So Trump himself has said we don't really need their oil, or maybe it was Rubio, his sort of step and fetch it. But they don't want China there, and China is the largest consumer of oil in Venezuela, of Venezuela's oil, just as it is, I gather, correct me if I'm wrong, of Iran's oil. So much of this has to do with a kind of, if you want to go high concept, with a kind of geostrategic chessboard, to thwart and hold back China. So that's
Okay.
that. I'll let the others deal
I
with
would
the
just like
other.
to very briefly go to about the woman who was killed in Minneapolis last week. Even if you're provoking somehow a police officer, you're not supposed to get shot 3 times in the face in the United States.
Thank you. And Iran bringing this on itself. I mean,
Sure,
go,
I'll
Kim.
take that,
I'd
but
love
I
you
want
say
to
that.
emphasize
Yeah.
what Scott just said.
Yeah.
Normalization of violence, normalization of police violence is a very dangerous, slippery slope. He could have shot the tires to stop her from driving away or driving over him, whatever he thought he was stopping. As Scott said, you don't need, and they don't have a mandate legally to actually, DHS does not have a mandate to shoot people on the street, even, that's not their mandate. So we need to be very clear, because it is a very slippery slope, and normalizing violence is something that happens very quickly. And before you know it, you're in a civil war. I'm not predicting civil war in the US, but I have grown up in a country at war in Lebanon, and it becomes normal very quickly, and we don't want that anywhere. When it comes to Iran, I will pick up on something Jon Lee said, that there is a link between Iran and Venezuela, of course, which we didn't speak about very much. But a lot of, Iran sort of, boasting about its power comes from also its alliance with Venezuela. And Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Proxy militia in Lebanon, Shia militant group, which is also a political group, part of society, but is very much a creation of Iran, has corrupt links to Venezuela and does a lot of drug trading and other illicit trading, which is how it funds its coffers. Now, removing Maduro doesn't change that, because the rest of the regime is still there, but it does undermine a little bit of Iran's position. Is it self-inflicted? Sure. The Islamic Republic has decided that they don't care about their people, and they're going to, build their nuclear program, build their ballistic missiles, line their pockets. This is really the IRGC Inc. at the moment, and the Supreme Leader Inc. I mean, everything is about their power and their enrichment at the expense of people. So it is self-inflicted. Does that mean that we should support or applaud regime change and military strikes from outside? I don't think so. Will it happen? Probably, but we'll have to see.
Now, is yours a 3-parter, my friend? Good. Okay, you may then ask your question. Right.
Thank you. First of all, well, only one question, really. Renee Good was shot by a fascist thug in the face 3 times with her dog in the back seat, and blood was splattered all over the daughter's plush animals in the front seat. There was nothing that could have provoked a cop to shoot a woman in the face 3 times. My question is completely unrelated. Greenland. We've skirted Greenland a couple times, and the question was asked about Europe. As soon as the Americans invade Greenland, which they very well might, all those American air bases, military bases in Europe close. The Germans will take them, the Polish will take them. I'm Dutch. We will take them too.
I could tell from your accent you were Dutch.
Thank you. There is suddenly no more American influence beyond the Atlantic without those bases. How does American imperialism/influence look after an invasion of Greenland?
Right. Well, I mean, Lyse Doucet, I mean, how much have we been talking about this of late? The fatigue stroke hysteria about the what is to come in Europe and the response. I mean, tell us what you've been hearing lately.
Well, everyone is asking, President Trump has made it absolutely clear day after day, he's going to take Greenland. Doesn't matter, at whatever the cost, whatever the opposition, he's going to take it. Now people are asking, is this the end of the NATO military alliance? I kept thinking, well, the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, a member of the UN Security Council, didn't break the UN Security Council, but someone who violated the UN Security Charter. But it certainly is testing the military alliance in a way it hasn't done before. Will the Europeans say to get out of we're not going to allow you to have military bases? What we have seen time and again is they give in to President Trump. They find ways around it to flatter him, to try to keep him on side. I don't think Europe is ready to give up on the transatlantic alliance, even though it is hanging by a thread. I think we just have to wait to see. And I was thinking, just because I listened to something, and Scott can speak to this, is that they often say that America is not just institutions and individuals, it's an idea, the American idea in the world. And is that idea going to go away? It is so deeply entrenched in so many minds. And speaking as a Canadian, we've been under that shadow all of our lives. You know, we're trying to diversify away from the United States, but you know, just can't get away from the big elephant, to use an Indian metaphor.
Yeah, look, we are out of time, I'm afraid, but if you do want to nobble these fine fellows, you can do. They'll be at the festival. Do we have more time? We've got the festival director. He said, no, take 5 more minutes. Okay, well, there, great. Great, okay. I no, William said we have 5 more minutes. Is that all right? Oh gosh, so fight. So there's going to be a fight between the venue operator and William Dalrymple. I wish you could be here, Lyse and Jon Lee. It's hilarious. Okay, I'm going to take one last question just because he's my friend. Okay, whoever the microphone sees first. There we go, right.
Thank you. I want to ask this from all of you, that as professionals, you are constantly engaged with topics which can be very dark and intense and even overwhelming at a lot of points. And I'm guessing it would have an impact on you as well. I want to ask that what is it that keeps you still going in the field and sort of overturning every stone? And how do you deal with it?
Okay, it's the despondency question, everyone. Kim Ghattas.
I've just spent the last 3 years working on a book which will come out in October, which made me relive the civil war in Lebanon, which I had already lived through, and made me rediscover and relive through all of the events, the bombings, the invasion, the hijackings, murders of friends, past and present. And it does get really very hard. It does get very hard. But what keeps me going is my sense of mission, if you will, about telling those stories, about giving people who don't have a voice, and bringing it to people like you. There is no better balm for my heart than to get questions from the audience, as in here, or get emails from people who've read my books, and they come from everywhere. You know, sports commentator in Milan, or an orchid grower in Dublin, or a policeman in Belfast, or people in the Middle East who say, wow, you know, it makes sense to me now, and that's what keeps me going, and that's what drives me in my writing. On a more mundane level, and I know everyone will have different answers, friendship, friends, community, yoga, and my dog.
Scott.
Yeah, that was a great answer. Not to sound flippant, but one of the great things about being a journalist, to my mind, is it's an excuse to be nosy. You can kind of go up to anybody and ask them anything. They may not answer you, but you have this sort of credential to do so. I think it's also the attraction of being, at times, being sort of a part of history as it unfolds, of being sort of at the ground zero of larger events. I also, for myself personally, I don't know what else I would do or that I'm good at, so kind of by default. So,
Lyse Doucet.
Yes, I think I would completely agree with Kim and also with Scott, and I'm sure Jon Lee will say the same. It's such an incredible gift to be an observer of the world, in our case, to be a journalist. It's also a responsibility to try to tell the stories which matter to the world. And like Scott, I'm amazed to this day that I can show up anywhere and say, I'd like to ask you a question, and people answer. They open their door, their hearts, some at the worst of times, and if they don't open the door and answer the question, then it becomes a story too. What is the refuge from that? I have to say, as a first-time author, I have found that the world of books is such a balm in every way. It is like a big, big hug, which is, to state the obvious, both Jon Lee and I are both looking forward to being at the Jaipur Literature Festival to celebrate what is still good in our world, to celebrate ideas and books and community. I have found in the last year of finishing my book and being out in the world to talk about it, is that people gather around bookshops and books and book festivals as a sense of community. And I think we feel it in the room today. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Lyse. And Jon Lee, finally you.
Well, many of the things that the rest of you have said, I would ascribe to as well. In my case, I was a book nerd when I was a little kid, and I used to read all these junior biographies of famous people. And as I grew, I found that I would always feel disappointed. I might want to admire this or that person, but if they hadn't been a witness to the great historical event of their time, I don't know, let's say they had lived in Paris and discovered the cure for whatever, Marie Curie, but she never went to the front line in the First World War. I was disappointed. I wanted them to have lived these big events that I felt were not just milestones of history, but were the engines of history. And I wanted to be that person. I wanted to live the history of my time. And it sounds a little highfalutin. I don't mean it like that. I've missed a few things. But I have this compulsion to be there, to see it for myself. And journalism has been the way that I've been able to justify my existence. Like Scott said, I'm not sure what else I could have done. For a while, I wanted to be a taxidermist, but that was only until I discovered girls.
Is that true? Is that true? Oh, he's your brother. It is true. Okay.
Pre-adolescence, yeah.
Okay.
Once adolescence kicked in, I discovered this world of, this other world. The taxidermy fell by the wayside.
Right.
And as for how to the balm, yes, books, family, children, dogs, nature.
Yeah.
Those are the things that keep me sane and centered, and being able to talk like this. There's a saying in Spanish, sacar los clavos, to pull out the nails. It comes from the idea of, I think, Christ being nailed to the cross. How do you pull your nails out? How do you be alive? How can you be healthy? These are the ways to do it. The things we all share and love. Children, family.
I just wanted to add, I just want to add a last thing. So John and I, we both kind of specialize in covering war, and I think between the two of us, it's probably been something like 40 wars, you more than me. So, if you're a head of state and you see either Jon Lee or show up in your country, it's usually not good news. So,
like the canaries in the mine. The brothers Grimm arrive. Listen, please do forgive us for going over so much. I hope you don't mind and you enjoyed that we did. There's so many more of you in here. Thank you very much indeed. Have a good night.